Finn Harrison stared at the holographic notice floating above his wrist display, its harsh red glow reflecting off the scratched metal walls of his tiny apartment on Nexus Station. 3 months of overdue rent, and now an eviction warning. He ran his fingers through his dark, unkempt hair and sighed. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Here he was, one of the best cargo pilots in the Outer Rim, reduced to scrounging for work in a space station at the edge of civilized space. His ship, the Stellar Whisper, sat impounded in the station's maintenance bay, held hostage by a mountain of docking fees and repair costs. Without it, he couldn't work. Without work, he couldn't pay his rent. The perfect trap. A soft chime announced someone at his door. Finn's stomach tightened. He knew who it would be. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing Naira Voss, his landlady. Even by Andromedan standards, she was striking. Her iridescent scales shifted from deep purple to midnight blue as she moved, and her silver eyes seemed to pierce right through him. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice carrying the musical undertones typical of her species, "I trust you received my message." Finn gestured at the hologram still hovering above his wrist. "Kind of hard to miss. Look, Ms. Voss, I know I'm behind, but if you could just give me a little more time. 3 months is quite enough time, don't you think?" She stepped into his apartment, her movements fluid and graceful. "I've been more than patient, Mr. Harrison, more than most landlords would be." He couldn't argue with that. Most landlords would have thrown him out after the first missed payment. "I know, and I appreciate it. It's just, my ship." "Yes, your ship." Naira's silver eyes narrowed slightly. "The one you cannot access without paying your docking fees, which you cannot earn without your ship. A rather circular problem, wouldn't you say?" Finn slumped against the wall. "That about sums it up." Naira studied him for a long moment, her head tilting slightly in that distinctly alien way. "Perhaps we could come to an alternative arrangement." "Alternative arrangement?" Finn straightened up, suspicious but intrigued. "I find myself in need of someone with your particular set of skills, Mr. Harrison. Someone who knows their way around the station's less reputable areas. Someone who can handle themselves in difficult situations." "What exactly are you asking?" Naira moved closer, her scales rippling with colors that seemed to dance in the dim light. "There have been disappearances in the lower levels. Refugees, mostly. People no one misses. The station authorities claim they're investigating. But," she shrugged elegantly, "let's just say I have my doubts about their enthusiasm for the task." Finn frowned. "And you want me to what? Play detective?" "I want you to help me find the truth. In exchange, I'm willing to be very flexible about your rent situation. And perhaps," she paused meaningfully, "perhaps I could even assist with your ship's predicament." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But what choice did he have? Why me? Why not hire a professional investigator? "Because you have nothing left to lose, Mr. Harrison. And in my experience, that makes people either very desperate or very honest. You strike me as the latter." Finn couldn't help but laugh. "You might be the first person to ever call me honest." A slight smile curved Naira's lips. "Then perhaps I see something in you that others have missed." She extended her hand, her scaled fingers catching the light. "Do we have a deal?" Finn looked at her hand, then back at her face. There was something in those silver eyes that made him want to trust her, despite every instinct warning him not to get involved. But she was right. He had nothing left to lose. He took her hand, her scales smooth and cool against his skin. "Deal. But I want to know everything you know about these disappearances." "Of course." Naira's grip tightened slightly. "Meet me in my office tonight, after the station's night cycle begins. We have much to discuss." As she left, Finn couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just signed up for more than a simple investigation. But for the first time in months, he felt something other than despair. He felt purpose, and maybe, just maybe, This strange arrangement with his alien landlady would be his ticket to getting his life back on track. Little did he know, he was about to uncover secrets that would shake Nexus Station to its core, and find himself drawn into a web of intrigue, danger, and unexpected emotions that would change his life forever. The night cycle on Nexus Station brought its own kind of quiet chaos. As Finn made his way through the winding corridors toward Naira's office, the station's artificial lighting dimmed to a soft purple glow, casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the curved walls. The main thoroughfares might have been less crowded, but the station never truly slept. He passed by the bustling night markets, where vendors from a dozen different species hawked their wares. The air was thick with the scent of exotic foods and the musical babble of alien languages. A group of Centaurian merchants haggled with a towering Krell over what looked like crystallized starlight, their voices rising and falling in practiced rhythm. Naira's office was located in one of the more respectable sectors of the station, far above the gritty lower levels where Finn's apartment sat. The door slid open at his approach, revealing an elegantly appointed room that seemed to reflect its owner's refined taste. Naira stood by a large viewport, her scales shimmering as she gazed out at the star-filled expanse beyond. "Right on time, Mr. Harrison," she said without turning. "I appreciate punctuality." "Figured I shouldn't keep my savior waiting," Finn replied, trying to keep his tone light despite his growing curiosity about what he'd gotten himself into. Naira turned to face him, and Finn noticed she was holding what looked like an old-fashioned paper file, a rarity in this digital age. 7 disappearances in the past 3 standard months, she said, getting straight to business. All from the refugee sectors in the lower levels, all species that aren't represented on the station's council. She laid out a series of holographic images on her desk. Faces of different species stared back at him. A young, sylphid female with gossamer wings, an elderly Trevos with his characteristic crystalline skin, a pair of meridian twins with their distinctive spiral horns. "The official story?" Finn asked, studying the images. "Voluntary departures. The authorities claim they simply moved on to other stations or planets." Naira's silver eyes flashed with barely contained anger. "But I've checked the departure logs. None of them ever officially left Nexus Station." Finn frowned. "That's not possible. Every ship, every shuttle, every escape pod, they're all tracked." "Precisely." Naira activated a holographic display of the station's lower levels, which means either they're still here somewhere, or they left by unofficial means. Finn finished, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Smugglers' routes, hidden compartments in cargo ships, maybe even. He hesitated. Even what? There are rumors about old maintenance tunnels from when the station was first built, places that don't show up on any official maps anymore. Finn had heard whispers about these forgotten passages during his less reputable jobs, but he'd never had reason to verify them. Naira's expression sharpened with interest. "And you know how to find these tunnels?" "I might know some people who know some people." Finn ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never quite broken. "But it'll be dangerous. The kind of folks who know about those routes aren't exactly the welcoming type." "I'm prepared to take that risk," Naira said firmly. She moved closer to him, her presence commanding yet somehow comforting. "These people came to my station seeking refuge, Mr. Harrison. They trusted us to protect them. I cannot, will not, ignore their disappearance." Something in her voice made Finn look at her more closely. "This is personal for you, isn't it?" For a moment, Naira's composed facade cracked slightly. "I was once a refugee myself, Mr. Harrison. I know what it's like to be vulnerable, to be seen as expendable." She straightened, her professional demeanor returning. "But that's not relevant to our current situation." "I think it is," Finn said quietly. "It explains why you're willing to trust a broke pilot with questionable connections to help you investigate this." A slight smile curved Naira's lips. "Perhaps, or perhaps I simply recognize that sometimes the most effective tools for uncovering truth are those that operate outside the usual channels." She reached into her desk and pulled out a small device, sliding it across to him. "This is a secure communicator. It's coded to my personal frequency. If you find anything, or if you need assistance, use it." Finn picked up the communicator, noting its military-grade construction. "This isn't standard civilian tech. Let's just say I maintain certain connections from my previous life," Naira replied enigmatically. "Now about your first task. There's a bar in level 47. Section C, the Crimson Nebula. The owner, a Korthos named Drax, is known for having his fingers in various, unofficial business ventures. You want me to talk to him. I want you to listen. People tend to be more forthcoming around their own kind. A human asking questions might draw less attention than an Andromedan landlady." Finn nodded, understanding the logic. "And my rent? Consider it suspended for now. Focus on this investigation. But Mr. Harrison," her voice took on a warning tone, "do not make me regret placing my trust in you." "I won't," Finn promised, and was surprised to realize he meant it. There was something about Naira's mission, her determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, that resonated with him. As he left her office, his mind was already planning his approach to the Crimson Nebula. He'd need to be careful. Korthos were known for their quick tempers, and their even quicker knives. But for the first time in months, he felt alive, purposeful. This strange arrangement with his alien landlady might just be the second chance he'd been looking for. Little did he know that his first visit to the Crimson Nebula would uncover far more than either of them had bargained for, setting in motion events that would change not only their lives, but the fate of Nexus Station itself. The Crimson Nebula lived up to its name. Red light filtered through crystalline fixtures, casting bloody shadows across the diverse crowd of late-night patrons. Finn nursed a glass of synthetic whiskey, letting his eyes adjust to the dim atmosphere while studying the bar's layout. 3 exits, 2 visible security cameras, and at least 4 armed bouncers, standard setup for a level 47 establishment. Drax, the Korthos owner, was easy to spot. His species-characteristic ridge of bioluminescent spines glowed a steady green as he moved behind the bar, all 6 arms working in fluid coordination as he mixed drinks. What wasn't standard was the way his spines flickered every time the door opened, betraying an underlying nervousness that seemed out of place for someone in his position. "You're in my seat, human," a gravelly voice announced behind him. Finn didn't turn around immediately, taking another slow sip of his drink. "Funny," he replied. "I don't see your name on it." The voice belonged to a burly sylphid male. Unusual for their typically slight species, his wings were scared, suggesting a life far removed from the ethereal gardens his kind usually inhabited. "Name's Vex," the sylphid said, dropping onto the stool next to Finn. "And you're either very brave or very stupid to be drinking in this sector." "Why not both?" Finn offered a lazy grin. "Buy you a drink." Vex's compound eyes studied him for a long moment before he nodded. "Meridian brandy." "Neat." Finn signaled Drax, who approached with obvious reluctance. As he set down Vex's drink, Finn noticed the Korthos' spines flashing in a rapid pattern he recognized from his smuggling days. A warning signal. "Trouble?" Finn asked casually, nodding toward the door where 2 hulking Krell had just entered. Vex knocked back his brandy in one swift motion. "Depends on what you're looking for, human." "Information," Finn admitted, deciding to take a calculated risk. "About people who've gone missing." The sylphid's wings twitched. Another tell. "Dangerous questions, the kind that get more people missing. So there is something going on." Vex leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Meet me in Maintenance Shaft 23B in 2 hours. Come alone, or don't come at all." Before Finn could respond, Vex was gone, moving with surprising speed for his size. The Krell at the door seemed to take particular interest in his departure. Finn activated the communicator Naira had given him, speaking softly. "You getting all this?" Every word, her voice came through clearly in his ear. Be careful, Mr. Harrison. This feels like a trap. Oh, it's definitely a trap. Finn agreed. Question is, whose trap? 2 hours later, Finn found himself navigating the cramped confines of maintenance shaft 23B, the station's recycled air growing thinner as he descended. The shaft was officially decommissioned, but the worn handgrips and fresh scuff marks on the walls told a different story. He found Vex waiting in a small junction chamber, the sylphid's wings folded tight against his back in the confined space. But he wasn't alone. Sorry, human, Vex said, genuine regret in his voice. They gave me no choice. The Krell from the bar emerged from the shadows, their massive forms seeming to fill the small chamber. But it was the third figure that made Finn's blood run cold, a tall, elegant Andromedan, wearing a station security uniform, his scales a perfect match for Nyra's. Sentinel Voss, one of the Krell rumbled. We found him snooping, just like you said we would. Finn's mind raced. Voss. The same surname as Nyra. This couldn't be coincidence. Well done, the Andromedan said, his voice carrying none of the musical quality of Nyra's. Though I must admit, I expected better from you, Mr. Harrison. Did you really think my dear sister wouldn't tell me about her new investigator? Brother, actually, Nyra's voice rang out as she stepped from another maintenance shaft, a pulse pistol trained steadily on her sibling. And Talon, you always were terrible at family reunions. Finn didn't hesitate. He dropped and rolled as the chamber erupted into chaos. The Krell moved with surprising speed, but in the confined space, their size worked against them. Vex's wings suddenly flared out, releasing a cloud of brilliant spores that filled the air with disorienting light. The fight was brutal and quick. When it was over, both Krell lay unconscious, and Talon Voss was pinned against the wall, Nyra's pistol pressed under his chin. Start talking, brother, she hissed, her scales rippling with barely contained rage. What have you done with them? Talon laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the metal chamber. Done with who, sister? The refugees, the lost souls no one would miss. Or perhaps you mean the test subjects. Test subjects, Finn demanded, moving to stand beside Nyra. Progress requires sacrifice, Talon said, his silver eyes gleaming with fanatic intensity. The evolution initiative demands it. These lesser species, they serve a greater purpose in our labs than they ever could in their meaningless lives. Evolution initiative. Nyra's voice shook. You're working with them, after what they did to our homeworld. They showed us the way forward, Talon insisted. Genetic perfection. The next step in evolution. And these refugees, they're helping us achieve that perfection, whether they want to or not. Finn saw the horror in Nyra's eyes, matched by his own growing disgust. Where are they? He demanded. Gone. Talon smiled, showing teeth that seemed too sharp for an Andromedan. Transferred to the Initiative's research facility in the Outer Rim. You're too late to save them. But don't worry. Their sacrifice will advance our species beyond your primitive understanding. Nyra's finger tightened on the trigger, but Finn placed a gentle hand on her arm. We need him alive, he reminded her softly. He's our only lead to finding them. She took a shuddering breath, then struck Talon with the butt of her pistol, knocking him unconscious. We need to move fast, she said, her professional demeanor returning despite the tremor in her voice. If what he says is true, those people don't have much time. Finn nodded, already planning their next move. I know some people who might be able to track those transfers, but Nyra. He met her silver eyes. This goes way beyond missing refugees now. The Evolution Initiative. They're dangerous. I know, she replied grimly. But we started this together, Mr. Harrison, and we'll finish it together. As they secured Talon and began their ascent back to the upper levels, Finn couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lurked in the shadows of Nexus Station. One thing was certain. Their investigation had just become far more personal and far more deadly. You need to see this, Nyra said, her voice tight with urgency as she pulled up a holographic display in her office. 3 days had passed since their confrontation with Talon, and they'd been working nonstop to track the missing refugees. Finn leaned over her shoulder, close enough to catch the faint scent of something like starflowers that seemed to cling to her scales. The display showed a series of shipping manifests, all marked with the same destination. Research Station Omega, deep in the outer rim. Look at the cargo descriptions, she pointed, her finger trembling slightly. Biological specimens, research materials, live samples, all shipped from Nexus Station over the past 3 months. Matching the timeline of the disappearances, Finn growled. But these manifests are sealed with high-level security clearances. How did you? I have my own resources. Naira cut him off, her scales shifting to a darker shade of purple. What matters is that we found them. Or at least, we know where they were taken. Finn studied the coordinates, his heart sinking. Research Station Omega is in restricted space. Heavy security, automated defense systems. Getting in won't be easy. Getting in? Naira turned to face him, her silver eyes wide. Mr. Harrison, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, he interrupted firmly. I'm offering. Besides, he managed a grim smile. I still owe you 3 months' rent. Before she could respond, the lights in her office flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Emergency backup power kicked in moments later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Station-wide power failure, Naira muttered, checking her systems. That's not possible unless... The door burst open, and 3 figures in black combat armor stormed in. Evolution Initiative insignias gleamed on their shoulders. Finn reacted instinctively, shoving Naira behind her desk as plasma bolts seared the air where they'd been standing. Run, he shouted, overturning the desk to provide cover. But Naira was already moving. Her ceremonial wall decoration, what Finn had assumed was merely decorative, revealing itself as an advanced energy weapon. They fought their way out of the office, Naira's precision shots matching Finn's street-learned brawling style. The attackers were well-trained but hadn't expected such fierce resistance. In the confined space of the corridor, their superior numbers meant little. We need to get to my ship, Finn panted as they sprinted through the emergency-lit hallways. Your impounded ship, Naira reminded him, pausing to fire another shot down the corridor. Trust me, he grinned, despite the situation. I've got a plan. They made it to the maintenance bay, alarms blaring throughout the station. The Stellar Whisper sat where she'd been gathering dust for months, her hull scared but proud. Override code Harrison 7 Delta, Finn shouted as they approached. The ship's engines hummed to life, boarding ramp extending. You had power to your ship this whole time, Naira demanded as they rushed aboard. Couldn't afford fuel, Finn explained, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. But I never let them completely lock her down. Call it professional paranoia. The ship's systems responded to his touch like an old friend. Outside, more initiative forces were pouring into the bay. We've got company, Naira reported from the co-pilot's seat, her fingers dancing over the weapons controls with surprising expertise. Hold on, Finn warned, firing up the main engines. The Stellar Whisper lifted off, her maneuvering thrusters scorching the deck. Warning shots from station security batteries streaked past them. They're sealing the bay doors, Naira announced tensely. Finn's hands tightened on the controls. That's what they think. He triggered a sequence he'd hoped never to use. Emergency explosive bolts around the Whisper's hull. The detonation was precisely calculated, just enough to breach the bay's magnetic seal without compromising the station's structural integrity. They shot through the gap into open space, pursuit craft already scrambling after them. Naira proved to be as skilled with ship weapons as she was with her personal armament, keeping their pursuers at bay while Finn pushed the Whisper to her limits. We need somewhere to regroup, he said, plotting multiple jump trajectories to confuse their trail. Somewhere off the grid. I know a place, Naira replied, her voice quiet. "An old refuge colony. It's where I stayed when I first fled my homeworld. Set course for the Helios Nebula." As they made the jump to hyperspace, Finn finally had a moment to process everything that had happened. He glanced at Naira, seeing the weight of betrayal heavy on her shoulders. "Your brother," he began carefully, "was more corrupted than I imagined." She finished, her scales dulled with grief. "The Evolution Initiative. They destroy everything they touch. My homeworld was just their first experiment. Now they're expanding, using refugee populations as test subjects for their genetic manipulation programs." "We'll stop them," Finn promised, reaching over to cover her hand with his. "We'll find those people and make the initiative pay for what they've done." Naira turned her hand to grasp his, her scales warm against his skin. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Harrison? This goes far beyond any debt you owe me." Finn was quiet for a moment. "Initiative Elite Forces," Finn confirmed, executing a dangerous role to avoid a quantum surge. "But they're not crazy enough to follow us into the heart of the storm." He pushed the ship deeper into the maelstrom, where probability itself became uncertain. The Whisper's hull groaned under the strain, systems flickering as reality fluctuated around them. "Finn," Naira said softly, using his first name for the first time. "The hull integrity." "Trust me," he interrupted, his eyes fixed on a point only he could see. "Just trust me." A massive quantum wave approached, big enough to atomize their ship. Instead of avoiding it, Finn turned directly into it. Naira's hand found his arm, gripping tight. The wave hit them just as Finn triggered an emergency hyperspace jump. For a moment, existence itself seemed to suspend. Then they were through, emerging in a quiet sector of space. The pursuit ships were gone, likely scattered across multiple probability streams. That, Naira breathed, was either brilliant or insane. "Probably both," Finn admitted, finally allowing himself to relax slightly. "But it bought us time to reach Research Station Omega." They spent the next few days preparing, studying the station's schematics that Naira's underground contacts had provided. The Evolution Initiative's facility was a fortress, but every fortress had its weaknesses. The station's power core, Naira pointed out during one of their planning sessions, it's separated from the main research labs. If we could create a diversion there, while simultaneously infiltrating through the maintenance ducts, Finn finished. It could work. But Naira, he met her eyes seriously. "This is practically a suicide mission." "Those people are suffering because of my brother's actions," she replied firmly. "I have to make this right." The moment stretched between them, heavy with everything still unsaid. Then Finn smiled. "Well, I've never been good at walking away from a fight, especially not from one that matters." They approached Research Station Omega under the cover of a manufactured sensor ghost, using the same technology that smugglers employed to slip past customs. As they drew closer, the station's true nature became apparent. A massive structure bristling with weapons, its dark hull reflecting no light. The infiltration began smoothly enough. Naira's codes, acquired through her refugee network, got them through the first layer of security. They split up, Finn heading for the power core, while Naira made her way toward the research labs. "Be careful," he told her before they parted. "You too," she replied, then hesitated before quickly pressing her lips to his. The kiss was brief but charged with emotion and possibility. Then they were moving, each focused on their mission. Finn planted the charges around the power core, timing them to create maximum chaos without threatening the station's structural integrity. They needed a diversion, not a massacre. When the explosions began, alarms blared throughout the station. Security forces rushed toward the power core, leaving the research labs relatively unguarded. Exactly as planned. But as Finn fought his way back toward the rendezvous point, he heard Naira's voice over their comm, tight with tension. "We have a problem. Talon is here." Finn's blood ran cold. Her brother must have escaped custody during the chaos on Nexus Station. "Naira, wait for me," No time. She cut him off. The subjects. Finn, they're not just experimenting on them. They're transforming them. Trying to create some kind of hybrid super soldiers. We have to free them now. Finn changed direction, running toward the labs. He arrived to find Naira facing off against her brother, who stood between them and a row of stasis pods containing the missing refugees. Sister, Talon sneered, his scales now an unnatural metallic black. Still fighting progress. I see. This isn't progress. Naira spat. This is torture. This is genocide. This is evolution. Talon's voice rose to a fanatic pitch. Look at me. I've transcended our limited form, become something greater. You've become a monster, Naira said softly, genuine pity in her voice. Talon attacked with inhuman speed, his enhanced form blurring as he moved. But Naira had been ready, dropping and rolling as Finn opened fire from the doorway. The siblings fought with desperate intensity, while Finn worked to release the stasis pods. The battle ended suddenly when Naira was forced to make an impossible choice: shoot her brother or save Finn from his cybernetically enhanced grip. She chose Finn, her energy weapon burning through Talon's augmented chest. You've chosen them over your own kind, Talon gasped as he fell. I've chosen life over your twisted vision of perfection, Naira replied, tears streaming down her face. They managed to evacuate most of the test subjects to the Stellar Whisper, though some were too far gone to save. As they fled the station, initiative forces in pursuit once again, Finn glanced at Naira. What now? He asked softly. She straightened, wiping her eyes. Now we get these people to safety. Then we take the fight to the initiative. They have to be stopped. That's not much of a retirement plan, Finn noted with a slight smile. Planning to retire, Mr. Harrison. A hint of her old playfulness returned to her voice. Not while there's rent to pay. He reached over and took her hand. And not while there are people who need our help. They made the jump to hyperspace, leaving Research Station Omega behind. The Stellar Whisper carried its cargo of rescued refugees toward a new safe haven, while its crew looked toward a future neither of them had imagined when their paths first crossed. You know, Finn said as they settled into their escape trajectory, I never thought being late on my rent would lead to all this. Naira smiled, her scales shimmering with renewed purpose. Sometimes the best journeys begin with a simple debt, and end with something much more valuable. Finn finished, pulling her close as the stars streaked past. They had saved lives, exposed a conspiracy, and found each other in the process. There would be more battles ahead, more refugees to save, more wrongs to right, but they would face it together, the pilot and his landlady, defenders of those who couldn't defend themselves. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, their story was just beginning. The end.